TKO Boxing with Sherry Abbasi, and today I'm joined once again by Mr. Dan Cannobio of Inside Boxing Live and CompuBox. Dan, I know, like I said, we haven't got a lot of time today, but I just want to thank you for giving me a bit of your time tonight and jumping on. It's been a little while since we last spoke. We spoke, I think, in October 2023. The boxing landscape has been through a big change. I'm sure we'll agree in the last 15 odd months. How have you been yourself, and how have you found the last year and a half, shall we say, of boxing?
Sherry, it is awesome to be on your show. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, boxing world changes in like a 10-day span. So it's changed so much since October of 2023. Obviously, Saudi Arabia dominating the headlines, Turkey Al Sheikh, Ring Magazine, that whole thing. So I assume there'll be some questions about that and some Canelo Crawford, which I think could be the fight that everyone's going to be gravitating towards this year. There's always one big mega fight in boxing. There's been some really great fights over the last like 24 months. But that's the big one in the boxing world that I'm being asked about a lot. But overall, I've been great, man. Very busy with ppv.com, our show with Chris Algieri that we just recorded, Inside Boxing Live. Yeah, it's like it was a slow month to start January, but I feel like it's about to ramp up like crazy in the next 11 months.
Definitely, and you have obviously had a very a big show you're a part of, the Netflix Jake Paul and Mike Tyson as well. So you obviously a very busy man in 2024, and massive congratulations on that opportunity. Thanks. As well, Dan. To get straight into it, so like you said straight away, you know, Riyadh season is dominating the majority of the boxing landscape. I think it's fair to say, outside of America at the very least. And even though they're involved with Golden Boy, Top Rank, PBC to differing and varying extents as well. What has been your sort of, as a boxing fan and someone who works in boxing media, what has been your feel for Riyadh season and what they've accomplished in the last 15 months, considering maybe with Fury and Ngannou when it was announced, a lot of us thought it was just a freak fight. I don't think we had any real inkling or understanding as to how much they were going to pump into the sport.
Well, I mean, if you go back even further, then in Ngannou Fury fight, like we saw AJ and Ruiz, their rematch was in Saudi Arabia. We saw Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury, which was in Saudi Arabia. And we see some random cards in Saudi from about 2018 on, but nothing like that we've seen over the last 24 months. I think the jury's still out. Obviously, there's a bunch of really good fights. There's no doubt about that. We're getting fights that we probably wouldn't get without the help of Riyadh and their large checkbook. Like Better Be of Bivol, obviously was never made for a reason because it is not a real marketable fight, although it's two of the best light heavyweights in the world. So they needed Riyadh money to get that over the line, and we're getting another one of those a month from now. But I would say, you know, the jury's still out because we've seen this in boxing a lot where these big time money comes into the sport, whether it's Waddle and Reed, which kind of was the PBC backers for a while. They gave them like $500 million. There's always going to be that one big money person in boxing. Just kind of when does it come? And right now it's Saudi Arabia. All the fights being over there for the most part is, I think, troublesome if you really want to build boxing here in the States. Like Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia. Love that we're getting that fight. Don't necessarily think we need Riyadh season to make that fight. Definitely belongs in the U.S., but it's happening over in Saudi Arabia. Now, Canelo versus Crawford, if that happens, it's going to happen here in the States. Love that. So they are like it's a mixed bag where we're getting fights that we normally wouldn't see, but I don't know if it's necessarily a great thing to have one person involved in making all the decisions in the sport. We see that with Dana White in UFC. I think fans ultimately don't care because they want to see the best fights get made. But in terms of the business side of things, I know that the fighters are getting really good pay from this, but if they're all under one entity, the pay will eventually go down and it'll be almost like take it or leave it type of deals. So ultimately, I think it's a net positive, but we're still waiting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely, and like you said, a lot of big maybe trade fights that people like me and you or hardcores we will tune in for. Beterbiev, Bivol, maybe the market wasn't there. The type of purses that maybe these guys financially, the value they have isn't really there. So the money was always going to have to come from an outside sort of entity, like you said. So even Fury and Usyk, Fury was, you know, the money he was looking for was never going to happen until someone put a crazy amount of money up. But thankfully, we did get a lot of great fights last year. So like you said, at the moment, it's all positive. Let's see how long it lasts and what it sort of progresses into, I suppose. For yourself, as an American boxing fan, I think you sort of touched on it there. With a lot of American promoters, for example, Top Rank and Golden Boy, at the very least, at the moment, sort of having a partnership now with Riyadh season, even if it's just a sponsorship and whatnot, and even putting on cards, for example, the Latino night was a Golden Boy thing majority, wasn't it? I think pretty much last November. What is your sort of opinion, not just as a media member, but as a boxing fan, of the current state of American boxing?
I mean, it's I wouldn't say struggling, but it's just like not what it was even a year ago. Like a year ago, let's say 2023. So more than a little more than a year ago, we had Spence Crawford, we had Tank versus Ryan, we had Benavidez versus Plant. I'm probably leaving some out, but it was a banner year for boxing in the U.S. PBC was the strongest promoter in the US at the time. They are no longer like a strong promoter. They still put on really good fights, and they still put on pay-per-view level fights here in the States, whether it's Tank, whether it's Benavidez, whether it's Canelo, who we don't know if Canelo's going to be involved with PBC moving forward. But I would say like the Top Rank is still around, but they don't put on mega events. They put on very good fight nights, title fights that are great, and they're on regular ESPN or ESPN Plus. PBC has a good schedule, like I said, in terms of pay-per-views, but we haven't seen too many of the Amazon shows that we were promised. So that's like a big hit for the U.S. market. Losing fights like Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney to Saudi Arabia, I think, is a big blow because I don't know if you know Adam Abramowitz. He just wrote a story about Riyadh season, like the pros and cons of it. And he made a really good point, which I 100% agree with. Like, if you are a casual boxing fan, if you're not even a boxing fan, and somehow you get tickets to a fight, or if you're a casual boxing fan and you go to a fight for the first time, you're going to get hooked because it's the best sporting event to attend live if there's a really good fight. So when there's not a lot of big fights here, it's hard to get involved in the sport. I mean, we're getting the big fights in Saudi, no doubt, but they're going off here in the States 4 p.m, going up against college football. I don't know how familiar you are with the lay of the land here, the sports landscape in the U.S. College football is huge. So Saudi doesn't care. Like Riyadh, Turkey, they don't care about ratings. They don't really care about losing money. They just care about having Riyadh season front and center. So I think the U.S. market has kind of taken a back seat. I hope it changes. That's my one issue. I'm a little biased because I'm from the U.S. It's my one issue, but it's a huge market. You shouldn't be leaving the U.S. out. Come on.
Yeah.
This is a massive. This is what the biggest fights forever have gone down in either New York City or Vegas. That's not the case anymore. Riyadh is now the mecca of boxing. The center of boxing is now in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So yeah, the long-winded answer, but I think the U.S. is taking a hit from if you look at just 2 years ago, 2023.
Yeah, correct. 2023, like you said, the fights you rattled off there, even the ones you missed out, like Lomachenko, Haney, Benavidez versus even Demetrius Andrade it wasn't a massive fight, but it was still a solid fight, a good fight to have. So I think, like you said, it is struggling a little bit. And then similarly, dare I say, in the UK, I think we've felt the force of this as well. Even though Queensbury and Matchroom are probably the more in bed with Saudi Arabia at the minute, they're sort of at the top table more than maybe Top Rank and Golden Boy are. I feel like a lot of the cards we're getting in the UK on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, the strength of the cards isn't really there anymore because a lot of the fighters are holding out for the Riyadh season cards and they're getting pulled in that direction.
I mean, rightfully so too. If I was a boxer, today, I would be doing everything I could to be involved with Riyadh season. It's a sport where no one's really looking after you. Yeah, it's a sport where no one's looking after you for the most part. Promoters are looking after themselves. So you're not in it for a long time, so you got to get it while the getting's good. And right now there's an ATM machine over in Saudi Arabia that's just dishing out money. So if you're a pro boxer, and I've talked to some boxers on the lower level, like when I do prospect shows for MVP, or I do a Broadway boxing with Lou DiBella and their outfit, and I hear from a guy that Jerry Forrest. I don't know if you remember him, heavyweight
boxer.
Yeah. Exactly. Had some pretty decent fights, and I'm doing the fighter interview with him. He hasn't fought in a big fight in 3 or 4 years. And I'm doing my fighter meeting with him, and I'm like, what are your goals? What do you want to do? Right away, I want to fight in Saudi Arabia. So he gets it. It's like the end all for fighters right now. I don't blame them.
Absolutely. It's a land of opportunities at the moment, like you said, so you got to go where the money is. I completely understand that. Since we've sort of spoke about a little bit about PBC and their sort of situation at the moment, no one with any sort of credibility or any sort of reputation online has said this, but there's been some people saying it online could be complete, nonsense. Have you heard anything about PBC being sold, or is it complete rubbish?
I don't know. I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen
No.
any reputable reporters talk about it. Like, the Mike Coppingers, the Keith Idicks, the Jake Donovan's. I think Jake Donovan addressed it with a tweet in his funny way.
Yeah.
I've not heard that, which is, and I will add this: PBC is not a promotion. It is
Yes.
it's a management company. Like Al Heyman is a manager, not a promoter. So that's why his fighters are technically allowed to fight on any platform if he gives them their
Absolutely.
blessing. They use TGB Promotions, which is Tom Brown's company, as the official promoter. So I don't know exactly what you'd be selling if there were to sell. So that right there kind of makes me think that this is just a string of another like PBC. Maybe one guy who doesn't like PBC puts out a tweet. They're not doing as many shows. I mean, there is some truth to them slowing down a little bit. I mean, you just see it with your eyes. But they're not dead yet, and they're not dead at all. I mean, I'm going out to Vegas on next week, part of a PBC card, and still Tank Davis. As far as I know, is still Canelo Alvarez. So we'll see.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I didn't see anyone with any sort of credibility say. I think it's just people clickbait and engagement farming and all that. But on the topic of PBC, Sebastian Fundora, Errol Spence, we saw has now not been made official. We were waiting for months and months for it to actually be announced. It didn't happen. What are your thoughts on what's happened there, and what's next for Errol Spence potentially?
I don't know, man. I did see that Keith Thurman is fighting in Australia.
Yeah,
Errol Spence and Keith Thurman are like the only two welterweights of this generation that didn't get it on. I don't know what Spence. I think he has so much money. He's accomplished so much. He's been through so much. His body. I was never felt that the Fundora fight was ever going to happen. It was kept getting delayed. It just didn't really make sense at all. So Spence is not someone that has to fight. I think he's doing it because he wants to. I don't think he wants to go out with that Crawford loss. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at a Spence Thurman fight if Thurman can get through that at 154. I know for a fact that Spence never fought Thurman because he just doesn't like him as a person.
Yeah.
Spence is one of the nicest guys I've ever come across in boxing, and Chris Algieri fought him, my co-host, and has said the same. Like this guy, it's hard to hate him. Even after the fight, you're still friendly with him. He just does not like our guy Keith Thurman. He just thinks he's corny. He doesn't think he's a good person. I don't know if that will change. And knowing Spence, he doesn't like to do tune-ups. And Keith Thurman, at this point of his career, is technically a tune-up, which is what it is. So Spence usually goes big or goes home. Still a name. Still sells tickets in Dallas. I think it's going to take some more time. He doesn't have a trainer. Doesn't have an opponent right now. He can just wait it out. He can afford to just sit back and assess the lay of the land at 154, chill on his ranch, with his horses, and just chill.
Yeah, he can relax. He's earned that, hasn't he? I think you mentioned Keith Thurman. I think that's a great person to sort of touch on. Keith Thurman, I was looking at the sort of the timeline myself. He's had 5 fights in 10 years almost coming this summer, which is crazy. Which I don't know whether to call it a disaster, a tragedy, a waste of talent. I don't know, because I feel like obviously he had a lot of injuries after the Danny Garcia fight. And I know that's a big part of it, but there must be other things as well that maybe we aren't privy to.
He lives a very simple life, Keith Thurman. I'm pretty sure he still drives a Toyota Prius, and he's made probably 10 million, maybe more in his career. He fought Manny Pacquiao, for God's sakes. He made a lot of money that night. I just think if your heart isn't 100% in the sport, and you have the Pacquiao money, you have the Thurman money, obviously, you have the money that he made in his career. He's not like some guys just can go without fighting. They don't have the same drive as a Pacquiao or Mayweather, which makes you really appreciate Pacquiao and Mayweather they just did it for 20 years. Mayweather is unbelievable, man. The guy, he had a couple of his retirements. This guy was just, and Canelo too. I'll put Canelo in that class. These guys just fight twice a year, 3 times a year, just so consistent. Where you have a guy like Thurman who doesn't have maybe the same drive and thinks that at this point in his career, he thinks that he can just start it up again. Obviously got hurt last time because his body is just breaking down. It's a really hard sport. It just shows you how impressive it is for even to have like a 10-year career in boxing, a 5-year career of consistent fights. Thurman couldn't really do that.
Yeah, it's physically taxing, so it adds up. And like you said, the inactivity isn't, going to help Thurman at this sort of advanced stage that he's at as well. So we'll have to see what happens with Thurman. But I think he's a welcome addition to the sport. He can talk, and he's going to give you a good show in the ring as well. Fingers crossed, as long as the fight does go ahead. Of course, on the topic of Sebastian Fundora as well, Sebastian Fundora is looking to defend his unified title. I think the name that was touted online was Charles Cromwell. I think he's on a few fight.
No, he's fighting Trudell Booker.
Sorry, wrong person. Yes, Trudell Booker.
I know, that's a lot of fights, man. It's hard to keep track.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so he's fighting Trudell Booker. Is that signed yet, or is that's most likely next?
It seems like that's the most likely. I was looking at that, a tweet about that. Like it was,
they
were looking at
WBO,
Conwell.
isn't he?
Number 5 in WBO, yes. They were looking at Conwell, which I would have really liked. Conwell, I think, is a dark horse at 154.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to get an opportunity. Good kid out of Ohio. Trudell Booker, also a nice guy as well. Number 5 ranked in the WBO. Not a fight that anyone's really clamoring for. We just talked about this in our episode. Fundora was dragged along by Spence. My feeling is that their management was like, let's get a voluntary defense in, which he has every right to, according to the WBO. Let's get a little payday, and then let's take a look at what happens at 154. Let's see what happens with Madrimov and Virgil. Let's see what happens if Boots goes up to 154. Let's see what happens with Zoo. Let's see what happens with some of the other champions or some of the other contenders at 154, which is like sneaky. Backrom too. I think him versus Fundora would be awesome.
War.
Give me that fight.
Absolute war. Absolute war. I want to see
if they're building towards that, then fine. Fundora's had some crazy fights himself. I think he needed the time off. I don't think he needed a full year. But remember he was knocked out cold by Mendoza.
Yes.
Then he finds himself
Lubin as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Lubin. Oh my God. Yeah. And then he finds himself in this. Right. Come on. What do we expect?
A lot of miles on the clock.
Yeah, they're human. So it's not the worst thing that Fundora took a year off. Probably it sucks that he got strung along by Spence because that was going to be game-changing money for him. But we'll see.
Excellent. I know we haven't got a lot of time, so I'm going to stick to the American boxing scene with you. Obviously, like you said, you're going to be flying out for Benavidez Morel. Is that what you said earlier?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that's a great fight. Two solid top-level fighters at 175 with implications for February 22nd as well in terms of WBC interim title, I believe, being on the line. What is your sort of a feeling on the fight? I know David Morrell is a solid fighter as well. Benavidez being a former world champion at super middleweight 2 times as well, and he's fought some good opposition, better than Morrell, and Morrell obviously less experienced. But what is your initial feeling when speaking to the fighters, and what sort of fight do you think we can expect on the night?
Oh man, I'm so excited for this fight. This is like a throwback. Neither of these guys have to fight each other. Morrell is hungry. He wants what Benavidez has, and Benavidez is still hungry. If Morrell beats Benavidez, he hops over Benavidez, and then he most likely gets a shot at Beterbiev or Bivol, or maybe even Canelo. If Benavidez wins, he's right in line to fight Beterbiev and Bivol. And once again, neither of them have to fight each other. They could have just taken the similar types of fights that they did in their last fights. Their first or second fight each at 175, which makes it it's a very even fight down the line. They're 28 years old, Benavidez, 27 for Morrell. Pretty much the same size. Same amount of knockout power in my opinion. Benavidez has way more experience, but Morrell has more amateur experience. It's just down the line. It's a very even fight, a throwback type of fight, a fight that fight fans are always want and have kind of been trained to be like, yeah, we're not going to get that, because it really doesn't make business sense at all. If you think about it, second fight at 175 for each guy, new weight class, potential fights with Canelo, potential fights with Beterbiev, potential fights with Bivol, just conventional wisdom of being a boxing fan, but just sit back and wait. But they're run towards it. So I love it. I'm so excited to get out to Vegas, and I'll be covering that for ppv.com. So order it there.
With your position on the night, are you able to make a prediction or not?
Well, I am doing something on Fight Night on the broadcast for DraftKings, so I will be making a lot of predictions. I will be making betting advice. I'll be giving you guys betting advice. So I don't have a prediction just yet for that fight. Obviously, Benavidez is a slight favorite, so I'm looking for the value. If I don't give a prediction, I'll just give you a lean or give you some value in terms of betting So that's what I'll be providing on Fight Night on the main broadcast.
Okay, excellent. And just to wrap it up, Dan, I know you got to shoot. We mentioned Beterbiev and Bivol. Obviously, we got a massive card Feb 22nd. There's too many fights to go through individually now. But the main event, obviously, the first fight was, razor thin in a lot of people's eyes. It could have gone either way. It could have been 114. Very much a technical, hardcore matchup in that sense, in terms of scoring and the style of fight we got. What do you expect second time around? Do you think it'd be exactly the same, where it's going to be razor tight, or do you see one of the fighters having to make some sort of change to open the fight into a new sort of way?
I think it's going to be pretty much the same type of fight. I think there'll be slight adjustments where we might get a few more pockets of really good exchanges. I think Beterbiev is going to open up more, and I think Bivol is going to stand and trade more, and that should make for a slight improvement. I like the first fight just because we're hardcore boxing fans, but if you were a casual fan, you tuned in for that one, you're like, oh, wow, this is what we've been waiting for like 10 years, because it didn't have like moments like Fury Usyk did in the first fight. It didn't have any of that. Second fight, maybe. Bivol might think in his mind, like, okay, I fought a really good fight in this first fight, and yet I did not get the W. What do I have to do different? I can't do the same thing. So if he thinks he has to do something different, it would be open up more. If he opens up more, Beterbiev is going to find him. And because Beterbiev, I thought, fought really well. I actually bet Beterbiev to win by decision. Not that I thought that was the right call. It was just like really good odds. But if Bivol decides I'm going to stand and trade more, I think we might see like a knockdown. I don't think we see a stoppage. I'm so intrigued by it. Really good fight. Can't wait.
And if I can just press you quickly, who would you lean towards in the match?
I mean, hard not to go against Beterbiev. I don't know. Who did you thought won the first one? Do you think it was Bivol or Beterbiev?
I had it literally 140. I couldn't split it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a really hard fight to even talk about. Like, this is what we do for a living, and I still can't figure it out because it's just like the judges are so really enamored with power. Judges, one thing I've learned from watching so much boxing and calling fights at the lower level, is like if the judges are going to reward one thing, it's going to be clean, hard punching. Not saying that Bivol didn't have his moments, because he really did in the first fight, but Beterbiev just lands thunderous shots. And even if they're not landing in the scoring zone, which really is a criteria, did you see Bivol's arm the next day? Did you see his hand? It was like blown up.
Swollen up. Yeah.
From Beterbiev just wailing on his arm and his hand. So that just shows you the type of power he has. Judges are really like power. So if Beterbiev can do his thing, just turned 40 too, which is kind of wild. Like, the guy's 40 years old and he's still like at the top of his game. I don't know, man. It's a really hard fight to face. I would maybe fear Beterbiev because of the power and the judges liking power, and me thinking it's going to be a 12-round fight.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you so much for your time, bro, and best of luck on Feb 1st with the Fight Night situation and everything you've got going on. And hopefully we'll catch up with you very soon.
Sherry, thank you for having me. TKO Boxing for life.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it.